Hi everyone, Crista Cowan here with another episode of The Barefoot Genealogist. Today we are talking about the updated search forms on Ancestry.com. This video tutorial will serve as the new tutorial for search going forward. Just to give you kind of an idea of timing, all new users as of the first week of November, this is the search experience that you have, and we will be rolling this search experience out over the next several weeks throughout the month of November and maybe even into December to the rest of our subscribers. So easily by the end of the year, all users, this will be your search experience. So I just want to make sure that you're aware of the changes that we've made to the search form and how to use them to get the most out of your time and your experience searching for records about your ancestors on Ancestry.com and our other global properties. So this search form will be rolled out to all Ancestry websites, so in the UK, Canada, Australia, Germany, Sweden, everywhere. Okay, let's go ahead and dive in. And we will just start right away with what the changes are that have been made. The first change is that you need to be using the advanced search form. Now previously that meant when you got to the search page you had to click an extra box. So this search form, which is on your home page for many of you, is still just the basic search form. It's designed specifically for new people coming to the website for the first time, just to kind of give them a taste of what's happening. Always, always, always click on the advanced search form or just click search and it will take you to the same place and use the full search form. This is going to give you the most control over what you're searching. It's also going to give you more options than that basic search form on the home page. So we're going to use the advanced search form. That's the first thing. And now you don't have to, when you get here, you don't have to click an extra button to do that. We've removed that. Now, one of the things you're going to notice, for those of you who were using the filters previously, the filters have now been hidden. However, don't freak out, they will appear as soon as you start typing in a field. There are a couple of reasons that we did that. One is that the filters, when they were there before, most of our users, or a lot of our users, were not actually using them. And so you would do a search and you would think that you were doing an exact search and you weren't. And so now what happens is when you start typing in a field, that filter shows up. And so then I can do what I want with the filter. It just is to make it more visible. So again, no filter in this field. When I start typing, it shows up, and then I can do what I need to with the particular filter. Again, just to make it more visible, more apparent that there is a filter. Excuse me. So that you can use it to control your searches a little better. Okay, the next change that we made has to do with the collection priority. Some of you didn't even know there was a collection priority. Those of you who were using it didn't understand that it was just to give priority to certain records, not to limit to certain records. In order to limit to certain records, you used to have to set the collection priority and then also check a little box. Now you do not have to check that extra box. So we've removed a step. So here on the search form, we now have a collection focus. When I select United States, for example, that means the only records I'm going to get in my search results are going to be US-based records. Now, just like always, directly below that, you're going to have the option of what categories of records to include in your search results. So we have historical records, photos and maps, family trees, stories, and publications. I can check or uncheck any of those at any time in order to further limit my search results. So all of that stays the same. Now, let's talk about the name fields in particular and whether we want to mark them exact or not. I always use my grandfather as my search result. My grandfather's name was Fred, but his whole life he was called Junior. His father's name was Frederick. And so we end up with this situation where, is his name Fred? Is it Frederick? Is it Frederick with an E in the middle, with a K at the end, without the E, with an H at the end? Lots of different variations of that name. But the first part of the name is typically fairly consistent. And so if I only want to see men named Fred or some variation of that name in my search results, I'm going to put that in there. I'm going to use a wild card, and we'll talk more about those in just a minute, and then I'm going to mark that exact. Okay, that means it's going to give me every variation of anything that starts with those 4 letters, F-R-E-D. Now my last name, and I've used this example often, my last name is Cowan, C-O-W-A-N, but I've seen it spelled C-O-W-E-N and C-O-W-I-N, and so I can use another wild card to account for that and mark that exact. Now the options I have under exact, I can also do a sounds like or a soundex, and so for my last name I could just type Cowan, how I spell it, and then do sounds like, and that would catch all of those different variations, Cowan, 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 with the different vowels in that word, okay? The other option I have under my filters for names is names with similar meanings or spellings. And so the example that I often use is when somebody immigrates from another country, sometimes their name, that instead of using the same surname, they translate their name. So a person who was, who had the last name Blanco in Spain may come to the United States and their last name may be White. Okay, and so that's what we mean by similar meanings. Okay, so that's going to be some variations of that. And then similar spellings just expands the soundex options really broader. And then we also have to keep in mind, particularly with given names, sometimes our ancestors are just recorded with their initials. And so, yes, I want to find every variation of Fred, but I also want to find, maybe every variation where the initials or the initial F is also used on a record. Particularly military records, we see that a lot, city directories, where it's just an initial that they're recorded with. So those are the filters that I have available with names. And again, I can use them or not use them. If I choose not to use the filters at all, okay, what's going to happen is Ancestry is going to look at the 7 or 8 fields that I fill out, and if anything matches everything exactly, that's going to show up at the top of my list. And then it's going to show me variations of the fields I've searched. So for example, if I've searched, if I've entered data into 7 fields and 6 of the fields match, that's going to show up next on my list. And then maybe 5 of the fields match, and then 4 of the fields. So that's how we kind of filter based on how many fields match what you entered. What that means is that sometimes you might get somebody who has an entirely different first name, but every single other piece of information that you've entered matches the record that you have. And we do that intentionally. At least in my family, I know, for example, family members very often went by given names, nicknames, middle names, right? Like they weren't always called what we think they were called. And so we're going to return records to you that closely match the information you've given us, unless you mark that exact. And if you mark it exact, then we will only return you records that match what you've given us. Okay? Hopefully that makes sense. Excuse me. At the bottom of every one of those filter fields, you're going to see a link called About These Settings, where we have tried to provide you with as much detail about how we're performing these searches and what each of these filters does, so that you can make some educated decisions about how to use the search filters in order to control your search to your satisfaction, and also in order to find the records that you're looking for. So you just click on that, and like I said, lots of really useful information, including information about those wildcards, information about different surname settings. I mean, we've tried to give you as much as we can to give you comfort with how you're searching. So let's just talk briefly about the wildcards. Some of you are aware they exist. Some of you, this may be brand new information. An asterisk, which on most keyboards is the Shift 8, an asterisk replaces multiple characters. So like in the example of my grandfather's name, his name is Fred, F-R-E-D. I've put an asterisk at the end. What that means, it's going to return me anybody whose name is Fred. Okay, in that case, the asterisk replaces 0 characters. It'll also return Fred, Freddie, Frederick, Frederick, okay, all of those different variations up to as many characters as it needs to replace. So it replaces anywhere from 0 to X number of characters. A question mark replaces a single character. So if I wanted to use that in the place of one letter, I could do that. So an asterisk and a question mark. Those wildcards can be used at the beginning or the end of a word, or in the middle of a word, okay? But they can't be used in both places. So you have to have a starting letter or an ending letter, one. Okay, so you can't have a wild card at the beginning and the end. I would recommend if you want to do that, do one search with the wild card at the beginning, one search with the wild card at the end to try to get what it is that you're looking for. Also, and this is a limitation we place to control the number of searches that are hitting our search engines, you must have at least 3 consecutive characters somewhere in the word. So you can do this asterisk, as a starts with idea, but there has to be at least 3 characters. So I could do FRE and then wild card. In this case, COW and then a wild card. So I've got those 3 consecutive characters somewhere in the word. That's going to make sure that my search results that are returned meet what I'm expecting. Now, let's talk about locations. If you'll notice here on the search form, the field that we now have right in your face is actually the single field that I use probably more than any other field on Ancestry, including name. I use it more than I even do name searches. Because one of the things that we sometimes forget when we're doing genealogy research is that we're not looking for people, we're looking for records. And records very often are location-based. The U.S. Federal Census is a U.S. geographical-based record set that then breaks down by state and county and town and enumeration district. Okay, World War I draft cards, geographical based. It's a U.S. based record collection that then breaks down by state and county. Okay, so most records that we deal with genealogically have some kind of a geographic element, and very often that element is going to be more accurate than any other single piece of information on that particular document. Okay, it's more likely to be accurate. It's also more likely to be spelled correctly, even though I have seen about 27 different spellings of the state of California on a census record, but it's more likely to be spelled correctly. Where it hasn't been spelled correctly, it's more likely that Ancestry, as we create indexes, have normalized it. So we've taken all those 27 different spelling variations for how census takers wrote the name or the state of California on census records, and we have taken all of those and pointed them to this one geographic location of California. Okay, so that lived-in field is for me anyway the most significant field that I can use. Now my grandfather lived in Los Angeles, and so I'm going to start typing that. One of the things you're going to notice is that I get what we call our type ahead location list. So if I start typing, this list is going to show up. It's going to narrow as I type more information. Okay, where possible, always select from that list. Okay, always select from the type ahead where it's applicable, where we have the location you're interested on the list. If we don't have the location you're interested on the list for whatever reason, maybe it's a historical location that no longer exists, maybe we haven't got it in our database for some reason, try to back out a jurisdiction. Okay, so in this example, if Los Angeles, California was not on the list, maybe I just type in Los Angeles County, or maybe I just type in California. It's still going to give me some control over my search, but it's going to allow me to use the geographic features that Ancestry has implemented based on these locations on our list. So our list is geotagged to specific locations. So we know where this location is. What that means is that the filter that we give you for that location is based on some geography. So you can search this place exactly, which means if I said only show me records that where he lived in Los Angeles and mark it exact, that means the only thing I'm going to get in my search results are records that somewhere have Los Angeles on that record. Okay, I could back that out to a county level. I can back it out to a county and adjacent counties. So I do this a lot when I'm searching for marriage records. A lot of times, even though a couple may have lived in a particular county, they got married in an adjacent county for whatever reason, because the courthouse in the other county was closer than their own courthouse, because they had family that lived there, because their uncle was the minister in the church in the other county, whatever the reason may be. And so that county and adjacent counties becomes useful depending on what kind of a record you're looking for. I can also back that out further to state or state and adjacent states, or just country if I want to get really crazy. Okay, so those are my available filters, and they work best when you have selected from the list, because like I said, then Ancestry knows exactly where that location is. We recognize that particular location. Now, my grandfather, he was born in 1922. He died in 2000, and so I can put this year range for his life. I can then add additional information if I want. Okay, now this information used to be kind of hidden, and so this is also a change to the search form. Rather than you having to select from a drop-down list that many of you didn't even realize that's what it did, we've now just laid out the events in a line. And so you can say, oh, well, I want to add a birth year, or I want to add a marriage year, or I want to add military information, whatever. You can add any one of those fields by clicking on it. And now you can enter, again, another date or year and another location. You can also add family members if you want to narrow your search even further by clicking on any one of these relationships. We still have a keyword search. We still have a gender search, race or nationality, and then there's that collection focus I spoke about. So I'm going to go ahead and click search and the only thing I've entered here is my grandfather's name, a lived-in location, and a range of years for his life. And so we're going to see here, if I back out just a little bit, there are 69 search results with just those 4 pieces of information: first name, surname, location, and lifespan. That's a really manageable list of search results. Okay, I mentioned lived in is that most useful field. We talked about geographic filtering. Again, there's going to be those settings for crafting those searches. Okay, now here's a bonus search tip for you, and this is really important. Always make sure you view your search results in multiple ways. If you always view your search results by record, try switching it to category. Or if you always view your search results by category, try switching it to record. It's just a different way to look at your search results, but it sometimes opens things up or helps you see things in a way you might not have noticed before. And so, I can come and look at this list this way. This is a record list. Basically what this is Ancestry has taken my search results, sorted them in a ranked order, giving me what the search engines consider the most relevant search results at the top of the list, and I can go through them. Now, in this case, there's only 33 or 69 or something search results, so that's not going to be that many pages. But what if you had, 1,200 search results or 10,000 search results? You're not going to want to go page by page by page. So we also, and this is not new, we've had this for a while, we also give you the ability to view your search results by category. So basically what that does is it takes those search results and it dumps them into categories, and then under each category you have specific databases as well. Okay? Now, the other thing I can do at this point, once I've looked at what I want to look at, is I can mess with these search filters over here. So let's say, for example, right, I know my grandfather lived in Los Angeles, but he didn't live there his whole life. He actually he was born up in San Francisco. And so I can say, I'm going to back that out to the state level, go ahead and click update, and now I have 2,200 search results. And that's going to include things like a birth index, right? And so there's going to be his birth record will show up on this list. As a matter of fact, here it is right here. Okay, I'm going to see his military record now, his World War II enlistment record, which didn't show up before. And the reason it didn't show up before was because it didn't happen in Los Angeles City, and I had marked Los Angeles City exact. And so when I back it up to the state level, I get records that just list the state, or just list the county, or occurred in an entirely different location within the state. Okay, so that's how I use those search sliders. You can do the exact same thing by just clicking on Edit Search if you don't want to use the sliders, and just change this filter right here. You can see it went from being this place exactly out to being state. Okay, now another couple of things that I just want to share with you. Sometimes we get people who get a little bit confused about how records are indexed and what that means for what you're going to see in your search results. Remember, over here I've got, I only want to see men whose names start with the letters FRE, whose last name is Cowan, and now I've got this lived in location as only show me the records from the state of California. Well, one of the things you're going to notice on this list of search results from the 1940 census is right down here towards the bottom, we've got this guy who was born in Ohio and is living in Ohio. So why did this guy show up on this list of search results? Well, one of the things about the 1940 census is that they had to say where they were living in 1935. And in this case, this guy was living in California in 1935. So from this list, if you were just looking at just your search results, it might look like Ancestry is returning records that you didn't ask for. But in fact, if you click through to the record page, you're going to discover that the information you asked for is probably indexed on that record. It's just not shown in that abbreviated view in your search results. There are a couple of different ways that this manifests itself. I just used that example as location. I have also seen, for example, people where the father's name is listed on the record, and this is the father's name. And so you might see like a William Cowan listed in your search results, but then if you look closer at the record, there is a Fred Cowan on the record. And so what we're doing is we're returning anything where this information, as you have it set exact or whatever filter you have set, exists on the records that we're returning to you. So that's how that works. Let's see what else. Let's talk about database specific search. Actually, let's just talk about the different ways to search. When you click search on Ancestry.com, when you just click the search button, it takes you to the search page. This is what we call our search or global search page. That means that you are searching all 15 billion records on Ancestry.com looking for whatever fits your search criteria. Okay, so if you're searching 15 billion records and all you put in is John Smith, chances are you're going to get, several million search results back. Now, if you put in John Smith who lived in California, you're going to narrow your search a little bit. If you put in John Smith who lived in Oakland, California, you're going to limit your search even more. If you put in John Smith who lived in Oakland, California and has a wife named Mary, you're going to limit your search even more. So each additional piece of information you put in is going to narrow or limit your search. But you also have to think about what kinds of data exists on a record. So, for example, if I was looking for a 1930 census record, I might include a spouse's name in order to narrow my search results, because that information is recorded on the 1930 census. However, if I was looking for an 1870 census, I would not include a spouse's name, because while the spouse might be listed in the household, prior to 1880, there was no relationship to head of household listed on the census. So we don't know, based on just that census information, that she's his wife. She could be his sister who's living with him and helping him raise his children. Okay, and I've seen that, so not out of the realm of possibility by any stretch. So you're searching all 15 billion records, and while it is a great way to just kind of dive in and see what exists, it might not be the best way. It is certainly not the only way to search. One of the other things that Ancestry allows you to do is do category searches. What that means is that you're searching only records included in a specific category. You're going to find, you're going to find that category search by hovering over the search button, and you'll see we have several categories set up. So I can search just census records, or just immigration records, just birth, marriage, and death records, or public member trees, or military records. When I do that, my search form changes. So when you do a global search, our search box has to account for every kind of record variation that exists. And there are so many variations. You've seen them, where information is included on one record and not included on another record, or it's labeled something on one record and labeled something different on another record. And our global search form has to account for all of that. So if you break it down to a category level, you now have a little bit more specificity about what it is that you're searching for. For example, if I'm searching for an immigration or a passenger list, so sorry about this cough. If I'm searching for a passenger list, I know that I can enter an arrival year. That will help me narrow my search down a little bit. So we customize those category search forms based on the category that you're searching. And again, just like with the global search form, when you start typing, you get the filters that show up, okay? So next is a database search. And what that does is it searches only records in a specific database. The fastest way to do database searches is to use the card catalog. So if I click on that, if I know, for example, that I'm looking for a Missouri marriage record, I'm just going to type in Missouri, and marriage records is going to show up right there at the top of the list. Now I am in a specific database. And again, because Ancestry knows what was indexed in this particular database, we can provide you with a customized search template based on the records we know exist and the fields we know were indexed in this particular collection. So it allows us to give you even more control over what it is that you're searching and how you search for it. Okay, so let me just share with you then the process that I go through when I do a search. Okay, so when I have somebody in my tree, the first thing I do is I look at the hints. Specifically, I look at the record hints. It's great when I find an ancestor in somebody else's tree and can make that connection, but I'm usually looking for records to document what I have in my tree or to take my research back another generation. And I want to do that independent of other people's opinions. And so I always look at record hints first before I look at other people's trees, before I look at anything else. So record hints. Then I look at suggested records, and here's what I mean by suggested records. Record hints are generated by the Ancestry.com system, going through what you have in your tree and giving you suggestions for records or hints for records that we think are also the same person that you have in your tree. Suggested records are generated by other users. So as people attach records to their trees, Ancestry's computers look at what other records they've attached to those people, and we serve those up here in this sidebar under suggested records. Now there is a new record page that is coming out, and you can preview that just by clicking on the little link, and you'll see those suggested records are now called See Also. Again, it was just a way of helping you look at those. We've given you a little help so that you understand how suggested records work and where they come from, but it's in the same spot, just looks a little different than it does on the current view of the record page over here. Okay, so that's how I do it. I look at hints, and then I look at suggested records. Then I go into my tree. So if I come in here to my tree and I'm looking at a particular person in my tree, I can look and see what records I've attached, what records I haven't attached, what records I still need, and I can search records. So I can search directly from my tree. And what that's going to do is it's going to take absolutely everything that is known in my tree about this person, and it's going to dump it into a search form. So here is the search form that has been filled out for me by searching directly from my tree. So it lists his name and when and where he was born and married and died, It lists all the places that he lived. It lists his parents and his siblings and his spouse and his children. Okay, so it lists just everything I know about this person, and it dumps it into a search form. Now here's the great thing about that, which is if I'm viewing my search results by record, it's going to take the information and it's going to bubble it up to the top of the list. Again, remember, the more fields that match, the higher it's going to show up on the list. And so I see a marriage record there that I didn't know about, and maybe there's a find a grave record and an Ohio birth record. I mean, there's some great information here in just these first few search results. Some city directories, maybe a draft card, or like lots of different things, right? I can look at those records, determine which are and are not for him. That's usually about all I do with a search directly from a tree, because very few records, actually, I do not know of a single record in existence that has every single one of these pieces of information on that record. And so I'm going to want to be a little bit more deliberate. So I'm going to look at what shows up at the top of the record results, but then I'm just going to craft a basic search. So I'm going to come in and I'm just going to click search to start over. I'm going to just type in Frederick Cowan, and he was, he lived in Ohio, and I didn't choose from the list, and he was born in 1887, and I think he died in 1945, so I can just fill in this basic information. I can set all of those filters to just the default and go ahead and click search. So a basic search here that I've crafted. Again, just take a look at what shows up at the top of the list. But now I'm going to switch to category view, and I'm going to look specifically for kinds of records. What records am I still missing? I found him in the 1900 census. I found him in 1930 and 1940. I'm missing 1910 and 1920. They didn't come up as a hint. They didn't come up as a suggested record. So I need to go directly to the 1910 database and see if I can find him in that particular database. And sometimes that means messing around with my search parameters. Maybe he wasn't indexed by the name Frederick. Maybe he was indexed a different way. Maybe I only want to see men with the last name of Cowan or some variation of that who were born in Ohio in 1887, plus or minus a year or two, because we know the census is very rarely precisely accurate. And I'm going to go ahead and click search. And so I can search without a given name. I can search without a surname. I can search with no name at all, with just some locations and years. I can search in specific counties. I can then play with whatever I want to, trying to locate the person I'm looking for. And if it hasn't come up in a hint, particularly a census record, chances are there's a reason. It's either been misindexed, or it's been miswritten by the census taker, or they're not where I expect them to be, or their age is off, or whatever, right? There's lots of reasons, and there's lots of ways to get around that, but sometimes it requires a little bit more diligent searching. And so this database-specific searching is really important. Now, say I find him in the 1910 census. Now I can just close this tab I just opened up, and I'm right back to my original search results without having to redo that search. And I can then move on to the 1920 census by just right-clicking on that link, opening it up in a new tab, and now here I have the 1920 census, and I can start going through that as well. So that is the process that I go through. I also take a look at all of those extra things that come up in search results and see if there's something I hadn't thought of. I know to go find a census record for everybody. I know to see if there are birth, marriage, or death records. Maybe I hadn't thought about the draft, right? He was born in 1887. He was eligible for the World War I draft. I need to go look at that. Maybe I hadn't thought about the fact that he traveled back and forth to Europe a couple of times, and maybe I can find him on a passenger list. Or maybe there's a newspaper when he got married, or when he received his commission, or when he was transferred by the military, or maybe there's maybe when he died, right? Maybe there's some newspapers that I need to look at. Maybe there is a local history written about the county where he was born and some of his prominent relatives. So again, viewing search results by this category just helps make me aware of some of the more than 32,000 databases available on Ancestry.com that I might not have thought to look in otherwise. And then the final process in my search process, right? I go through hints and then suggested records, then I search from the tree, then I do basic searches, then I do database specific searches just to see what I can find. And oftentimes I'll do that for entire families, right? Rather than doing a database specific search for the person that I'm looking for, I'll do a database specific search for a particular surname in a particular location. So I can type in, helps if you spell it correctly, Carroll, Arkansas. I can type in a specific location and select that from the list, mark the surname exact, and see what comes up that might pertain to my specific family in a specific location. So that's my final bonus tip for you today, which is, for the best success in searching, develop search habits that use all of the tools available to you. Ancestry does a really great job of making the records, 15 billion of them, remember, more accessible to you in as many different ways as possible. And one of the things about human nature is that very often we get stuck in a rut. We get used to doing something a very specific way, and we do it over and over and over again, and sometimes we expect different results, when the reality is you're not going to get different results unless you try it a different way. And so we've made some changes to update the search form. Hope that they are useful for you. Cannot wait to hear your feedback about them. But develop or get used to or create a checklist like I have there of all the different ways that you can access the records that you need in order to keep climbing your family tree, in order to document the lives of your ancestors and prove that you're really climbing your family tree and not someone else's. Well, that is all I have prepared for you today. Hopefully this was useful information. As always, we appreciate feedback. And if you're watching this on YouTube, feel free to leave a comment or a question in the comments below. If you're watching this live at our regularly scheduled time, a member of our social media staff will be on chat to answer any additional questions that you may have. Until next time, this is Crista Cowan. Have fun climbing your family tree.